You won't imagine the depth of trouble this man got himself into. After hurting the heroine of today's story, I doubt he'll live through the night. Who knows? But before we step into the underworld, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. It helps our family grow and ensure you never miss a new release. I want this comment section to be buzzing today. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you tuning in from? And, while you're listening, timestamp your favorite parts. If a scene makes you laugh or swoon, let me know right when it happens. Are you ready? Let's get into the story. The thing about kneeling men, Saad would later reflect, is that they all looked remarkably similar when their kneecaps kissed concrete and their bravado evaporated like soju on hot pavement. She stood in the center of an abandoned warehouse in Seongsadong, the kind of place that smelled of rust and broken promises, watching 7 men kneel in a perfect line. Each one had their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Each one wore the expression of a man who'd just realized he'd brought a knife to a gunfight, or more accurately, had brought casual violence to meet a man who'd perfected it into an art form. Minjun stood beside her, his hand resting with deceptive gentleness on her shoulder. To anyone else, it might have looked protective, almost tender. Saad knew better. She could feel the rage vibrating through him like a tuning fork struck against stone, barely contained, humming with the promise of violence. "Which one?" he asked softly. Saada's left eye was swollen nearly shut, her bottom lip split in 2 places, and 3 of her ribs were cracked. She diagnosed herself before Minjun had even arrived, clinical detachment her only defense against panic. Looking at these men now, remembering the alley, the fists, the boot that had connected with her ribs while someone laughed. "Third from the left," she said. He was the one who spoke. "Who said?" Her voice caught. "Who delivered your message?" Minjun's hand tightened fractionally on her shoulder. Then he was moving, crossing the space between them with the fluid grace of a man who knew his body was a weapon. He stopped in front of the third man, who was younger than the others, maybe late 20s, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. "Look at me," Minjun commanded in Korean. The man kept his eyes on the ground. One of Minjun's men, a mountain of muscle Saad had mentally nicknamed the Wall, stepped forward and grabbed the kneeling man's hair, yanking his head back. "When Kong SSI speaks, you listen," the Wall growled. Up close, Saad could see the man's face clearly. Recognition sparked. Yes, this was him. The one who'd smiled while his companions held her down. The one who'd called her Minjun's foreign whore, like the words were meant to reduce her to nothing. "You touched something that doesn't belong to you," Minjun said, his voice carrying the temperature of liquid nitrogen. "Do you know what we do to people who take what's mine?" The man's eyes darted to Saad, then back to Minjun. "Boss, we didn't know. The Beck family said she was just some girl you were." "Just some girl." Minjun repeated the words like he was tasting poison. "The Beck family told you to assault a medical student. A civilian. A woman under my protection. And you thought this was acceptable." "We thought." "No." Minjun crouched down, eye level with the man now. "You didn't think. If you had thought, you would have realized that Kong Minjun doesn't make idle gestures. When I repair my heater, it means something. When I pay for medical care, it means something. When I ensure someone's safety, it means everything." He stood, brushing invisible dust from his Tom Ford slacks. Saad noticed, with the surreal clarity that shock provides, that he'd changed clothes since arriving at her apartment. The blood-stained shirt was gone, replaced by immaculate black on black that made him look like an avenging angel, if angels carried Glocks and had kill counts. "Saad SSI," Minjun said, switching to English, his accent wrapping around her name like silk. "Do you know what untouchable means in my world?" She shook her head, though she could guess. "It means that harming you carries the same consequence as harming me. It means every man in Seoul's underworld knows that your safety is guaranteed by my word, and my word is." He smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Saad had ever seen. "Absolute." He turned back to the kneeling men, switching to Korean. "By morning, everyone will know. The medical student who lives in Gangbuk, who walks home alone at night, who eats ramen and studies cardiothoracic surgery, she is untouchable. Her name is written in blood, and that blood is yours." 12 hours earlier. The fluorescent lights of Seoul National University's medical library had become Sada's second home, though she often joked they were more like her first. Her actual apartment was just a place where she occasionally remembered to sleep. At 24, she'd mastered the art of existing in two worlds: the sterile, rational universe of anatomy textbooks and surgical procedures, and the chaotic, vibrant reality of being one of the few Black women in South Korea's most prestigious medical program. Her mother was Korean, her father Nigerian, and Saad had inherited what she called the best and worst of both: her mother's stubborn perfectionism and her father's inability to back down from a challenge. It was a combination that had gotten her through medical school's brutal gauntlet, but it was also the reason she found herself, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday 3 months ago, pressing gauze against a bullet wound in her kitchen while a man who looked like he could buy and sell her entire neighborhood bled onto her cheap IKEA chair. "You should go to a hospital," she'd said for the third time, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "Hospitals ask questions," he'd replied, his voice rough but oddly calm for someone with a hole in his shoulder. "You're not asking questions." His name was Kang Min-jun, though she wouldn't learn that until later. What she knew immediately was that he was Yakuza, no, wrong country, Japuk. Korean Mafia. She knew it from the full-sleeve tattoo peeking out from under his blood-soaked designer shirt, from the way his 3 companions stood guard at her door with the casual alertness of men who expected trouble, from the thick envelope of cash they'd placed on her counter without discussing price. She also knew it from the way he looked at her, not with the curiosity or occasional fetishization she'd grown accustomed to as a Black woman in Seoul, but with the calculating assessment of someone evaluating a business asset. It should have been offensive. Somehow, it was refreshing. "Your suturing is excellent," he'd observed as she worked, as if critiquing a restaurant meal. Medical student? 4th year. Trying to be, anyway. She tied off the last stitch with perhaps more force than necessary. "This is extremely illegal, you know. I could lose everything." "You won't." It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the absolute certainty of a man whose word rearranged reality. "What's your name?" She should have lied. "Saad." "Saad," he repeated, the syllables slightly awkward in his mouth, softened by his accent. "Like the singer?" Despite everything, the blood, the guns, the casual criminality unfolding in her kitchen, she laughed. "My dad wishes. It's actually spelled differently. Yoruba name. Means honor bestows a crown." Something flickered in his eyes. Fitting. That had been 3 months ago. Since then, Min-jun had returned twice more, once with a knife wound, a disagreement about territory, once with what she suspected was a cracked rib, a disagreement about respect. Each time, he'd paid generously. Each time, she'd told herself it was the last time. Each time, she'd known she was lying. Medical school didn't pay for itself, after all, and she was already drowning in debt that made her nauseous when she calculated the interest. Her part-time job at the university clinic barely covered her rent in a shoebox apartment in Gangbuk, where the walls were so thin she could hear her neighbor's entire K-drama marathon every weekend. The money Min-jun left could have been dirty, blood-soaked, morally compromised. It was also the difference between eating ramyeon for the 4th night in a row or actual vegetables. She told herself that's why she kept helping him. She told herself it had nothing to do with the way he listened when she complained about her biochemistry professor, or how he'd somehow arranged for her broken apartment heater to be fixed within hours of her mentioning it, or the strange sense of safety she felt around a man who was objectively one of the most dangerous people in Seoul. "You're being an idiot," her best friend Yoonji had said over soju and fried chicken, their traditional stress relief ritual. Korean Mafia? Really? What's next? Dating a chaebol? Becoming a K-drama protagonist? "I'm not dating him. I'm providing medical services. At 2 a.m. In your pajamas. With bedroom eyes." "I don't have bedroom eyes." "Saad, you have bedroom eyes, bedroom voice, and bedroom everything when you talk about him. It's actually disgusting." Yoonji had pointed a chicken drumstick at her accusingly. "Also, he's mafia." As in organized crime. As in murders people probably. She wasn't wrong. Saad knew she wasn't wrong. But there was something about Minjun that defied the simple categorization of gangster or criminal. He was unfailingly polite, spoke 3 languages fluently, and once spent 20 minutes discussing the ethics of doctors without borders while she stitched up his forearm. He was violent, yes, but violence in his world was a language, a tool, a necessity. She understood necessity. Medical school had taught her that sometimes you had to cut to heal. Still, she'd been careful. She never asked about his business. She never tried to contact him first. She kept their interactions professional, clinical, bounded by the clear transactional nature of their arrangement. Right up until the night everything shattered. It was a Thursday. She would remember that detail with crystal clarity later, the mundane specificity of it. Thursday, 11:47 p.m., and she'd been walking home from the library, earbuds in, lost in a mental review of cardiothoracic anatomy. The street was the same one she walked every night, familiar as her own heartbeat, past the 24-hour convenience store where Mr. Park always gave her extra gimbap, past the nori bang where drunk salarymen butchered ballads, past the shuttered cosmetics shop with the fading English sign. She hadn't noticed the black van until it was too late. One moment she was mentally cataloging the branches of the aortic arch, brachiocephalic, left common carotid, left subclavian. Her mnemonic was baby left crying loudly. The next, hands were grabbing her, rough and efficient, yanking her sideways into the alley beside her building. Her medical bag went flying. She heard her phone clatter against concrete. Then someone's fist connected with her face, and the world exploded into stars and copper taste. Message for Kang Minjun, a voice hissed in Korean, close to her ear. The accent was Busan. She registered with the bizarre detachment of shock. Tell him to stop protecting his little foreign whore, or next time we won't be so gentle. She tried to fight. Her father had insisted on self-defense classes when she'd moved to Seoul, and she knew the theory. Go for the eyes, the throat, the groin. But theory evaporated when 3 men held her down and a 4th drove his boot into her ribs once, twice, 3 times. She heard something crack, anterior ribs 5 through 7. Her clinical mind supplied helpfully, displaced fractures, high probability of pneumothorax, and then she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only curl into herself as the blows kept coming. Remember, the voice said. You're just a message. Be grateful we're not delivering you in pieces. Then they were gone, melting back into the soul night like they'd never existed. Saad lay there for a moment, or maybe an hour. Time had gone elastic, staring up at the narrow slice of sky visible between buildings. No stars, just the perpetual orange glow of city light pollution. She tasted blood. Everything hurt. When she tried to sit up, her ribs screamed protest, and she had to bite down on her split lip to keep from crying out. Get up, she told herself. Get inside. Lock the door. You're in shock, but you're functional. Get up. She got up. The crawl to her apartment door was approximately 15 meters that felt like 15 kilometers. Her hands shook so badly she dropped her keys twice. Inside, she made it as far as the bathroom before her legs gave out, and she found herself on the tile floor, back against the bathtub, breathing in shallow gasps because deeper breaths made her ribs feel like broken glass. She should call the police. That's what normal people did when they were assaulted. They called the authorities, filed reports, let the system work. But she wasn't normal people. She was a medical student who'd been treating a mafia boss in her kitchen, who'd accepted blood money for months, who'd crossed a line so far back she couldn't even see it anymore. The police would ask questions. They would want to know why she'd been targeted, who Kang Minjun was, what her connection to him was. And then she'd lose everything. Her scholarship, her visa, her entire future gone. Her phone was still in the alley, probably shattered. But Minjun had given her a second number, written on a business card she'd tucked into her bathroom mirror frame. Emergencies, he'd said. With hands that wouldn't stop trembling, she pulled herself up to the sink, retrieved the card, and dialed the number on her laptop using a calling app. He answered on the first ring. This is Kong. Her voice came out wrecked, barely recognizable. It's Saad. Silence. Then, where are you? My apartment. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. One eye was already swelling shut, her lips split in two places, blood matting her hair. I'm not okay. I'm coming. Don't move. Don't call anyone else. I'm coming right now. He hung up. Saad slid back down to the bathroom floor and waited, counting her breaths, shallow, tachypneic, approximately 28 per minute, definitely not good, cataloging her injuries, facial contusions, rib fractures, possible concussion. Doing anything to keep her mind from circling back to the fear. He arrived in 15 minutes, which should have been impossible given Seoul traffic, but somehow wasn't. She heard the knock 3 short, 1 long, their signal, and called out hoarsely, "It's open." The sound of her apartment door opening. Footsteps, quick but controlled. Then Minjun was in the bathroom doorway, and Saad watched his face do something she'd never seen before, crack. For a moment, just a moment, the mask of the untouchable Mafia boss fell away, and she saw raw fury war with something that looked almost like fear. Then his expression smoothed, and he was kneeling beside her, his hands hovering like he was afraid to touch her. "Who did this to you?" he whispered. And Saad told him everything. Chapter 2. The Gathering. Minjun made 3 phone calls from Saada's bathroom floor, each one shorter than the last, each one delivered in the clipped, precise Korean of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to convey absolute authority. Activate the network. I want everyone. Seoul, Incheon, Busan, everyone. Find me 7 men. Busan accent. Hired muscle, not regulars. They moved against a civilian tonight. Tell Dr. Yoon I need him. Now. No, not the clinic. I'm sending you an address. Between calls, his attention never left Saad. He'd retrieved a clean towel from her cabinet. How did he know where she kept them? And was gently dabbing blood from her forehead with a tenderness that seemed incongruous with his earlier tone. How bad? He asked. Professional pride kicked in despite everything. 3 fractured ribs, left side. Probable grade 2 concussion. Multiple facial contusions. No internal bleeding that I can detect, but without imaging, she winced as he touched a particularly tender spot. I should probably get an X-ray. You'll get a full CT scan. Dr. Yoon will bring a portable unit. That's not a thing. Portable CT scanners aren't. It is when you pay enough. His jaw tightened. Did they say anything? Give you any indication of who sent them? They said, Saada's voice caught. They said I was a message. That you should stop protecting your foreign whore. Those were the exact words. Something dangerous flickered across Minjun's face. The Beck family. You know who did this? I know who ordered it. He set the towel aside and finally, carefully, touched her face, his fingers ghosting along her uninjured cheek. There's a territorial dispute. The Beck family wants my shipping routes in Busan. I refused. This is them trying to show me I have vulnerabilities. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. I'm not your vulnerability, Saad said, trying for defiant and landing somewhere near exhausted. I'm your unlicensed medical provider. There's a difference. Is there? Minjun's dark eyes held hers. Because they seemed to think otherwise. Before Saad could formulate a response, and what could she say, really, there was another knock. This time, Minjun rose to answer it and returned with an elderly man carrying a doctor's bag that probably cost more than Saada's entire education. Dr. Yoon, Minjun said in Korean, this is Saad. Be gentle with her. Dr. Yoon, who looked like someone's kindly grandfather and probably had a body count that would make serial killers weep with envy, smiled at Saad. Medical student, yes? 4th year? Minjun speaks highly of your suturing. He speaks about me? Saad said faintly. Constantly. It's become tedious. Dr. Yoon knelt with a soft grunt, his practiced hands already assessing her injuries with the efficient touch of someone who'd seen worse. Much worse. The ribs will heal in 6 weeks with rest. The concussion is mild. Your pretty face will be back to normal in 10 days, maybe less. How do you know it's a mild concussion? Pupil response, verbal coherence, the fact that you're already arguing with me. He pulled out a penlight. Follow this. Good. Now, I'm going to give you something for the pain. No. Saad shook her head. immediately regretted the motion. No painkillers. I need to stay clear-headed. Dr. Yoon looked at Minjun, who nodded once. As she wishes. The examination took 20 minutes. Dr. Yoon confirmed her self-diagnosis, added a few colorful bruises she'd missed, and wrapped her ribs with the kind of professional efficiency that spoke of decades of practice. He left her with antibiotics, stern instructions about rest, and a knowing look that suggested he understood exactly what was happening here. After he left, Minjun helped Saad to her feet and guided her to the couch. Her apartment looked different through a swollen eye, smaller, shabbier, the pretense of safety stripped away. I need you to understand something, Minjun said, sitting on her coffee table so they were eye level. What happened tonight changes everything. Changes how? You're no longer just someone who provides me medical care. You're now a target. The Beck family knows about you, which means others will know soon. Knowledge is currency in my world, and you, he gestured at her battered face. You're now valuable information. Sada's stomach dropped. So what, I'm just supposed to hide? Change my name? Drop out of medical school and disappear? No. The single word was absolute. You're going to continue exactly as you were. Medical school, clinic work, your friend Yunji's terrible soju nights, all of it. You know about my soju nights? Saad. He said her name like a reprimand. I've known your schedule since the first night you sutured my shoulder. I've had 2 men watching your building. I had your route from the library secured. Clearly, his voice went cold. Not secured enough. The implications of that hit her like a truck. You've been having me followed? Protected, he corrected. Though obviously my men failed. They've been dealt with. Dealt with? What does that? She stopped. You know what, I don't want to know. Wise. Silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of her cheap refrigerator and the distant sound of her neighbor's television. Sada's ribs ached. Her head throbbed. Everything felt surreal, like she'd stepped through a mirror into a world where the rules she understood no longer applied. Why? She finally asked. Why what? Why protect me? I'm nobody. I'm just a medical student who made the mistake of opening her door to a bleeding gangster. You could walk away, let me be someone else's problem. Minjun leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost uncertain. Like he was about to say something that would change the topography of their carefully maintained distance. Do you know what the first thing I noticed about you was? He asked instead. My excellent suturing? Your hands. He reached out, caught her right hand in his, studying it like it held secrets. They didn't shake. Not once. You had a man bleeding in your kitchen, 3 armed men at your door, enough illegal activity happening to destroy your career, and your hands were steady as stone. Saad looked down at their joined hands, his, scarred and calloused from violence, hers, marked with paper cuts and old chemical burns from lab work. Most people, Minjun continued, freeze when confronted with my world. They panic, they run, they compromise themselves trying to appease. You just adapted. Like you'd made a cost-benefit analysis and decided the benefits outweighed the risks. I needed the money, Saad said weakly. You needed more than money. You needed to know you could survive anything. He released her hand. I recognize that. I recognize you. So when I say you're under my protection now, it's not charity or obligation. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Respect. Sada's throat tightened. Respect that comes with a target on my back. Respect that comes with my word that the target will never hit its mark. He stood, pulling out his phone. By evening, everyone will know. The medical student in Gangbuk is untouchable. That's not a metaphor, Saad. It's a law in my world, one that carries weight from Seoul to Busan to Jeju. And if someone breaks that law? Minjun's smile was all teeth and shadows. Then they'll learn why people don't break my laws. While Minjun made arrangements, Saad sat on her couch and tried to process the fact that her life had just been rewritten without her consent. She'd spent 4 years building her future brick by careful brick, perfect grades, impeccable recommendations, a spotless record that would carry her through residency and into a career where she could finally prove that all the sacrifices, her parents' money, her social life, her 20s spent hunched over textbooks, had been worth it. Now she was untouchable, protected by Seoul's most dangerous man, a named asset in a criminal empire. Her phone, retrieved from the alley by one of Minjun's men, miraculously intact, buzzed. Yoonji, where are you? You promised to review my pathology notes. Saad stared at the message. What was she supposed to say? Sorry, got beaten up by rival gangsters, currently being declared untouchable property by my Mafia boss client. Home. Not feeling well. Rain check? You're always studying. Take a break for once. Want me to bring soup? No. I'm fine. Just need rest. Fine. But you're buying next round of soju. Saad set the phone aside, fighting the urge to laugh or cry or both. Yoonji had no idea. None of her classmates did. To them, she was just Saad, serious, studious, a little strange maybe, with her unusual background and her habit of disappearing for days at a time during exam periods. They didn't know about Minjun, about the money, about the careful dance she'd been performing for 3 months. They definitely didn't know about tonight. Minjun returned, pocketing his phone. It's done. The word is spreading. By midnight, every organization in Seoul will know. Just like that. Just like that. He sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and understated. There's going to be retaliation. The Beck family won't like being challenged publicly. But that's my problem, not yours. It's literally about me. No. It's about disrespect. You were the weapon they chose, but this has always been about territory, power, the usual tedious posturing that men with too much pride engage in. He turned to look at her. You're collateral damage they tried to exploit. I'm making sure they regret that mistake. By doing what? By showing them that some collateral is too expensive to damage. Before Saad could respond, the wall appeared in her doorway. She really needed to learn these men's actual names and nodded once. We found them. Minjun stood. All 7. All 7. They're being held at the Seongsa location. Good. Minjun turned to Saad. I need you to come with me. Saada's remaining functional eye widened. Excuse me. You need to identify them. Make sure we have the right men. I know. Absolutely not. I'm not going to some warehouse too. You are. His tone left no room for argument. Because if you don't, and we have the wrong men, then the right ones are still out there. And next time, Saad, they might not leave you able to walk away. The logic was sound, and Saad hated it. She hated that he was right, hated that her world had narrowed to this impossible choice, hated that some part of her, the part that had her father's stubborn pride, wanted to see those men face consequences. Will you? She swallowed. Will you kill them? Do you want me to? The question hung in the air. Did she? These men had beaten her, left her bleeding in an alley, used her as a message. They would have killed her if ordered to. The rage that thought sparked was immediate and terrifying. Saada's voice cracked. I want them to know they can't do this. That they can't just, she gestured helplessly at her battered face. I want them to be afraid. Minjun's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then come. Witness. Let them see what they created. And Saad, against every instinct that said this was wrong, nodded. Chapter 3. The Warehouse. The drive to Seongsadong took 40 minutes, though it felt simultaneously like seconds and hours. Saad sat in the back of Minjun's Mercedes, because of course he drove a Mercedes, probably bulletproof, definitely worth more than her life, and watched Seoul blur past the tinted windows. The wall drove with the calm competence of someone who'd done this run 1,000 times. Minjun sat beside her, making phone calls in rapid Korean that she only half understood. What she did catch: complete message, no, all channels, yes, the medical student. By tomorrow morning, everyone knows. They crossed the Han River, the water black and glittering under bridge lights. Saad remembered crossing this river for the first time 6 years ago, fresh off the plane from Lagos via her mother's hometown in Gwangju, wide-eyed and terrified and determined to prove she belonged. She'd imagined her future so clearly then: graduation, residency, maybe a position at Seoul National University Hospital, making her parents proud. Nowhere in that imagined future had there been a scene where she rode to a warehouse to identify her attackers for a mafia boss. You can still change your mind, Minjun said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. I can take you home. You never have to see any of this. And spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if those men are out there? Saad shook her head, immediately regretted the motion as her concussion protested. No. I need to see this through. You're certain? Was she? Certainty was a luxury for people whose lives hadn't just been appended. But resolve that she had. Her father's voice echoed in her head. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And when they threaten your life, defend it. I'm certain. The warehouse loomed out of the industrial darkness, like something from a noir film, all rusted metal and broken windows. The kind of place where bad things happened and nobody asked questions. 2 men stood guard at the entrance, straightening when they saw Minjun's car. One was smoking, the other scrolling through his phone. Both immediately pocketed their distractions and bowed. Minjun exited first, then offered Saad his hand. She took it, letting him help her out with a gentleness that seemed absurd given where they were and why. Inside, the warehouse was exactly what she'd expected: concrete floors, exposed rafters, the ghost of industrial equipment long since removed. Fluorescent work lights had been set up in the center, creating an island of harsh illumination in the surrounding darkness. And in that island, 7 men knelt. Saad stopped walking, her hand instinctively tightening on Minjun's arm. This was real. This was happening. Those were the men who'd. Easy, Minjun murmured. You're safe. They can't touch you. She forced herself to breathe, to look. Really look. The men were lined up like some perverse police lineup, hands zip-tied behind their backs, each one wearing varying expressions of fear, defiance, or resignation. They ranged in age from maybe mid-20s to late 40s. All had the hard look of men who'd spent their lives in violence, scarred knuckles, broken noses poorly healed, that particular wariness in the eyes. The wall had followed them in, along with 4 other men Saad didn't recognize. All of Minjun's people, she assumed. All armed, though they tried to be subtle about it. Which one? Minjun asked again, his voice carrying in the cavernous space. Saad stepped forward, her ribs screaming protest. She studied each face, matching them to her fractured memories of the attack. The one who'd held her down, broad shoulders, missing incisor. The one who'd gone through her bag, nervous energy, couldn't stop moving even now. The one who'd kicked her ribs. Third from the left, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He was the leader. The one who spoke. Who gave the message about you? Minjun nodded once, then crossed to stand in front of the 3rd man. Up close, Saad could see he was younger than she'd thought, maybe late 20s, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow that gave him a permanently sardonic expression. Look at me, Minjun commanded. The man kept his eyes on the ground. The wall stepped forward and grabbed his hair, yanking his head back roughly. When Kong SSI speaks, you listen, the wall growled. The man's eyes found Minjun's face and Saad saw recognition there. More than that, fear, poorly masked. You touch something that doesn't belong to you, Minjun said, each word deliberate and cold. Do you know what we do to people who take what's mine? Boss, the man said, his Busan accent thick, we didn't know. The Beck family said she was just some girl you were using, that you wouldn't care if we. Just some girl. Minjun repeated the words like they tasted foul. The Beck family told you to assault a civilian. A medical student. A woman under my protection. And you thought this was acceptable. We thought. No. Minjun crouched down eye level now. You didn't think. If you had thought, you would have realized that Kong Minjun doesn't make idle gestures. When I repair someone's heater, it means something. When I pay for medical care, it means something. When I ensure someone's safety, it means everything. He stood, adjusting his cuffs with the precise movements of a man about to do something unpleasant but necessary. Saad SSI. She stepped forward, hating how her body trembled, refusing to let it show. Do you know what untouchable means in my world? Saad shook her head. It means that harming you carries the same consequence as harming me directly. It means every man in Seoul's underworld knows that your safety is guaranteed by my word, and my word is he smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Saad had ever seen, all teeth and zero warmth. Absolute. He turned back to the kneeling men, his voice carrying to every corner of the warehouse. By morning, everyone will know. The medical student who lives in Gangbuk, who walks home alone at night, who eats ramen and studies cardiothoracic surgery, she is untouchable. Her name is written in blood. He paused. And that blood is yours. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and threat. Minjun pulled out his phone, tapped something, and within seconds, Saad heard the distinctive chime of multiple phones receiving messages. The men around the perimeter of the room checked their devices, nodded, pocketed them again. "What did you just do?" Saad asked. "Sent your photo and details to every organization in Seoul. With a message, touch her and answer to me. Look at her wrong and answer to me. Think about harming her. Answer to you." "I get it." Saad looked at the kneeling men, at their fear, and felt something complicated twist in her chest. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not quite regret either. Something in between, uncomfortable and necessary. "What happens to them now?" "That," Minjun said, "depends on what you want." All eyes turned to Saad. The kneeling men, Minjun's people, even the wall, all waiting for her word. The power was dizzying and nauseating in equal measure. "I'm not," Saada's voice cracked. "I can't decide whether people live or die. I'm a medical student. I save lives, I don't." "You're the injured party," Minjun interrupted gently. "In my world, that gives you rights. Authority. If you say the word, these men disappear. If you show mercy, they live with the memory of it. Your choice." Saad looked at the third man again, the one who'd called her a whore, who'd smiled while his friends held her down. Part of her, the part that was her father's daughter, that carried rage like a torch, wanted to see him suffer. Wanted him to feel even a fraction of the helplessness she'd felt in that alley. But another part, the part that had spent 4 years learning to heal, that had taken the Hippocratic Oath even if it wasn't technically binding yet, recoiled from the idea. These were people. Terrible people, yes, who'd done terrible things. But people. She swallowed hard. I want them to remember that actions have consequences. That they chose to hurt someone, and it cost them. What cost? Saad thought about it. About justice and revenge. About the thin line between them. The one who led them, who delivered your message, I want him to understand what it's like to be powerless. The others. She looked at the remaining 6 men. Let them go. With the knowledge that they owe me their lives. Minjun studied her for a long moment, and Saad couldn't read his expression. Approval? Disappointment? Something else entirely? Generous, he finally said. Unexpectedly so. I'm not like you, Saad said quietly. I can't be. No, Minjun agreed. You're better. Which is exactly why you need to be protected. He turned to the wall. Cho, take the 6. Drop them in Busan with a message for the Beck family. Their next attempt won't be met with mercy. The walled Cho, apparently his name was Cho, nodded and gestured to his men. The 6 kneeling men were hauled to their feet and marched out, their relief palpable even in silence. Which left one. The third man, their leader, looked up at Saad with eyes that were equal parts terrified and defiant. You think this changes anything? You think being Kang's whore makes you special? Before Saad could respond, Minjun moved. Fast. His fist connected with the man's face with a crack that echoed through the warehouse. The man's head snapped back, blood spraying from his nose. That word, Minjun said conversationally, shaking out his hand, is no longer applicable. She is untouchable. Which means she is respected, revered, protected. Use that word again, and I'll remove your tongue. The man spat blood. Fuck you and your. Minjun's second punch was surgical in its precision, targeting the same spot. More blood. The man swayed on his knees. Cho, Minjun said without taking his eyes off the bleeding man. Take him to the basement. I'll be down shortly to discuss proper respect. The basement? Saad asked, then immediately regretted it. Some things were better left unknown. Soundproofed, Minjun said, as if that explained everything. Which, horrifyingly, it did. Cho dragged the man away, leaving a trail of blood droplets on the concrete. Saad stared at those drops, her medical mind automatically calculating blood loss, minimal, mostly from superficial capillary damage. He'd be fine. while the rest of her tried to process what she'd just witnessed. "I didn't ask you to do that," she said quietly. "I know. I did it anyway." Minjun pulled out a handkerchief, silk, monogrammed, and wiped his knuckles. "Do you want to leave? I can have Cho drive you home." Did she? Part of her desperately wanted to flee this warehouse, this world, crawl into her bed and pretend tonight had been a particularly vivid nightmare. But another part, the part that was tired of being afraid, tired of being a victim, wanted to stay. To see this through. To understand exactly what untouchable meant. "I'll wait," she heard herself say. "Until you're done." Minjun's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Are you certain? What happens in the basement? I don't need to see it. I just need to know it's finished." Saad met his eyes. "Is that weird?" "No." His expression softened. "It's survival. You're making sure the threat is neutralized." "That's smart." "It feels less like smart and more like morally questionable." "Welcome to my world." Minjun gestured to a relatively clean area near the wall where someone had set up folding chairs. "Wait here. This won't take long." He disappeared through a door marked with Korean characters Saad couldn't quite make out in the dim light. The moment he was gone, exhaustion hit her like a wave. Her ribs throbbed. Her head pounded. Every injury she'd catalogued earlier was now screaming for attention, demanding rest and painkillers and maybe a time machine to go back and avoid this entire night. One of Minjun's men, younger than the others, with kind eyes, approached with a bottle of water. "For you, miss." "Thank you." Saad took it, grateful. "What's your name?" "Lee, miss." "Jin-ho Lee." "You can just call me Saad." Jin-ho looked scandalized. "That would be disrespectful." "You're Kung SSI's," he paused, clearly trying to find the right word. "Honored person." "His honored person?" "Yes. Very important. Very protected." Jin-ho shifted uncomfortably. "We all received the message. Your photo, your protection status. Every man in Seoul will know by morning." The water turned sour in Sada's mouth. "Every man in Seoul will have my photo? Only your face. No personal details except that you're under Kong SSI's protection." "It's..." Jin-ho searched for words. "It's like diplomatic immunity, but for criminals. Nobody touches you, nobody threatens you, nobody even looks at you wrong. Very high honor. And if someone breaks that rule?" Jin-ho's kind eyes went cold. "Then the answer to all of us. Not just Kong SSI. Every man who received that message is now responsible for your safety. To harm you is to challenge us all." Saad sat with that information, turning it over in her mind. She'd gone from anonymous medical student to what? A protected asset? A mafia princess? The thought was absurd and terrifying and, in some small treacherous corner of her mind, almost thrilling. From the basement, she heard a muffled shout. Then silence. She didn't want to think about what was happening down there. She especially didn't want to think about the fact that she'd essentially given Minjun permission for whatever that was. "But you didn't," her conscience whispered. "You said you wanted him to understand powerlessness. You didn't specify how." 15 minutes later, Saad counted, unable to help herself, Minjun emerged. His shirt was still immaculate, his expression calm, but his knuckles were swelling and there was a small blood spatter on his collar that he'd missed. "It's done," he said simply. "Is he alive?" Terrified. Properly educated on the concept of respect. Minjun sat beside her and up close, Saad could see the tightness around his eyes that suggested the violence had cost him something, even if he'd never admit it. "He'll be released in the morning with a message for the Beck family. This ends here. Just like that. Just like that." Minjun looked at her, really looked, and something passed between them that Saad couldn't quite name. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. "You did well tonight. I watched you terrorize 7 men. You set boundaries. You chose mercy where it was deserved and consequences where it was necessary. That's leadership, Saad. That's strength. That's moral relativism, and my ethics professor would have a field day with it." Minjun laughed, actually laughed, a sound so unexpected that Saad found herself smiling despite everything. Your ethics professor doesn't live in the real world. Out here, morality isn't absolute. It's contextual, flexible, survival-based. That's a depressing worldview. It's an honest one. He stood, offered his hand. Come on. Let's get you home. You need rest, and I need to finish spreading the word about your new status. Saad let him help her up, her body protesting every movement. As they walked toward the exit, she caught sight of the blood droplets on the floor again and felt something shift inside her. Some line she crossed, some innocence lost. She'd entered this warehouse as a victim. She was leaving as something else entirely. Chapter 4. The Aftermath. The next morning, Saad woke to 3 things: excruciating pain, 47 text messages, and the realization that she'd crossed a threshold she could never uncross. The pain was expected. Cracked ribs and facial contusions didn't heal overnight, despite what K-dramas suggested. The texts, though, those were a problem. Most were from Yoonji. Where are you? You're not answering. I'm coming over. Why is your door locked? Saad, answer your phone. If you're dead, I'm going to kill you. 3 were from unknown numbers with messages in Korean that, when translated, were variations of, "You have been marked as protected by Kang Minjun. We acknowledge and honor this protection. Stay safe." The last part felt almost sarcastic, given that she was safe specifically because she wasn't safe, if that made any sense. And one was from Minjun himself, timestamped at 4:47 a.m. By morning, everyone knew. Sleep well, doctor. Doctor. Not medical student. Doctor. Saad stared at that single word for longer than was probably healthy, analyzing it the way she'd analyze a biopsy sample. Was it affection? Respect? A simple mistake? Or was it Minjun's way of acknowledging what she would become, if she survived all this with her future intact? Her phone buzzed again. Yoonji calling this time. Saad answered, her voice rough from disuse and the night before. I'm alive. You better be. I was about to call the police. Why weren't you answering? Are you sick? You sound terrible. Saad caught sight of herself in the mirror across from her bed and winced. Her left eye was completely swollen shut now, purple and grotesque. Her lip had split open again during the night, probably from unconsciously worrying it. She looked like she'd gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight boxer. I'm not feeling great. Think I'm coming down with something. What kind of something makes you sound like you gargled gravel? The throat infection kind? Suspicious silence. Then, I'm coming over. No. Yoonji, it's fine, I just need rest. Tough. I'm bringing soup. And medicine. And if you're actually dying, I'm going to be so mad at you. She hung up before Saad could protest further. Panic fluttered in Saada's chest. Yoonji couldn't see her like this. One look at her face, and all her careful lies would crumble. Yoonji was studying to be a diagnostician. She'd recognize assault injuries in a heartbeat. Saad tried to stand, made it approximately 3 feet before her ribs reminded her why movement was a bad idea. She gripped the wall, breathing through the pain, mentally cataloging. Definite displacement of the 5th rib, possible cartilage damage. Healing will take minimum 6 weeks, maximum 8. Avoid all strenuous activity. Which right now includes standing apparently. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. This is Cho. Kong SSI requests you stay home today. Arrangements have been made with your university. Rest. Arrangements? What kind of? Her phone buzzed again, this time from an email address she recognized, the Medical School Administration. Dear Ms. Adeyemi, we have received notification of your medical emergency and have excused you from all classes and clinical rotations for the next 2 weeks. Please focus on your recovery. Attached is documentation for missed coursework and extension requests for upcoming examinations. We wish you a speedy recovery. Sincerely, Dean Park. Saad read the email 3 times, her medical mind automatically noting the impossibility of it. You didn't just get 2 weeks of excused absences from medical school. The program was merciless. Students had shown up with pneumonia, broken bones, active COVID infections. The unspoken rule was, if you were conscious and your organs were functional, you came to class. Minjun had done this. Somehow, he'd reached into her carefully constructed academic world and bent it to his will. She should be furious. Violated. Her education was hers, not something for him to manipulate. Instead, she felt relieved. The thought of dragging herself to histology lab with cracked ribs and a face that looked like tenderized meat had been nauseating. Now she didn't have to pretend. For 2 weeks, she could just exist. Assuming Yoonji didn't show up and ruin everything. Saud attempted to make herself presentable, which was like trying to polish a disaster. She managed to change out of her blood-stained clothes from last night. When had she even gotten home? Minjun must have brought her back and into a hoodie that mostly hid the bruises on her arms. The face, though. The face was unsalvageable. She was contemplating whether she could reasonably claim she'd walked into a door, the most cliché lie in existence, when her apartment buzzer rang. "It's me. Let me up." Saud pressed the button, then spent the next 3 minutes arranging herself on the couch in a way that suggested mildly ill rather than recently assaulted by gangsters. She pulled the hood up, kept the left side of her face angled away from the door, and prayed to gods she wasn't sure she believed in that Yoonji would somehow not notice. The knock came. Saud called out, "It's open," because standing was still a non-starter. Yoonji burst in with the force of a small hurricane, carrying approximately 7 plastic bags from the convenience store. "Okay, I got you soup and those honey ginger," she stopped. Stared. Saud. "Hey. What the fuck happened to your face?" "So much for subtlety." "I fell," Saud said weakly. Stares. "Very embarrassing. Don't want to talk about it." Yoonji set the bags down with deliberate care, then crossed to the couch in 3 strides. Before Saud could protest, she'd grabbed her chin, tilting her face into the light with the clinical detachment of a doctor examining a patient. Periorbital hematoma, split lip, that bruising pattern on your jaw suggests. Yoonji's eyes went dark. "Someone hit you. Yoonji. Someone hit you." She released Sauda's face, stood back, and Saud watched her best friend cycle through shock, rage, and finally cold calculation. "Who? When? Have you been to the hospital? Filed a police report?" "I can't." "Can't what? Can't tell me?" "Can't report that someone assaulted you." Yoonji's voice rose. "Saud, this is serious. You need medical attention, you need." "I've had medical attention." The words came out sharper than intended. Dr. Yoon examined me. Confirmed 3 fractured ribs, mild concussion, no internal bleeding. I'm on antibiotics and have strict rest instructions for 6 weeks. Yoonji froze. "Dr. Yoon? How do you know doctor?" Realization dawned across her face. "Oh my god. Oh my god. Your Mafia boss. This is because of him, isn't it?" Saud said nothing, which was answer enough. "I'm going to kill him." Yoonji started pacing, a habit from her days on the debate team. "I'm going to actually murder him. You help this man, you save his life multiple times, and he repays you by, what? Getting you beaten up by rivals? By dragging you into his criminal bullshit. It's not, it's complicated." "Complicated." Yoonji stopped, whirled. "You're sitting here looking like you got hit by a truck, and you're saying it's complicated?" "Saud, he's dangerous." "I told you he was dangerous. Why didn't you listen?" Because Minjun made her feel seen in a way no one else did. Because his world, for all its violence and moral ambiguity, felt more honest than the polite pretense of medical school. Because when he looked at her, he didn't see foreign student, or diversity admission, or any of the other careful labels people applied. He just saw her. But she couldn't say any of that to Yoonji, whose world was built on clear rules and defined boundaries. "It's handled," Saud said instead. "The men who did this, they've been dealt with. And I'm protected now." Minjun made sure of it. "Protected? How?" Saud pulled up the email from the unknown numbers, showed Yoonji the protection acknowledgement. Watched her friend's face go through another complicated series of emotions. "He made you untouchable?" Yoonji's voice was strangled. "Saud, do you understand what that means? You're not just connected to him now, you're marked. Every criminal in Seoul knows your face. Your name. Where you live, probably. They already knew where I lived. That's how they found me. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing." Sauda's own voice rose, her ribs screaming in protest. "You think I wanted this? You think I asked to be dragged into an alley and beaten until I couldn't breathe? I made choices, Yoonji. Maybe they were stupid choices, but they were mine. And now I have to live with the consequences." Silence fell like a blade between them. Yoonji sank onto the coffee table, her earlier anger deflating into worry. I'm sorry. I'm scared for you. This isn't some K-drama where the mafia boss falls in love with the innocent girl and everything works out. This is real. People die in this world. I know. Sada's voice softened. I know it's real. But I'm in it now and I can't get out. So I might as well make the best of it. The best of it? Sad. He's making sure I'm safe. He pulled strings to get me medical leave. She paused. He's taking care of me. That's how it starts. Yoonji's eyes were sad. They take care of you, make you dependent, and then... And then what? He uses me? Controls me? Saad shook her head. Minjun isn't like that. How do you know? Because of the way he'd whispered, "Who did this to you?" like her pain personally offended him. Because he'd given her choice, even in a warehouse full of kneeling men. Because he'd called her doctor like he believed in her future more than she sometimes believed in it herself. But again, she couldn't say that. Not to Yoonji, who saw the world in black and white, good and evil, safe and dangerous. I just do, Saad said finally. And I need you to trust me on this. Yoonji was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed, a sound that carried the weight of resignation and continued worry. Fine. But I'm staying today. Someone needs to make sure you actually rest and don't do something stupid like try to study organic chemistry with a concussion. I wasn't going to. Yes, you were. I know you. Yoonji started unpacking the convenience store bags. Now, soup. And then you're going to tell me everything, and I mean everything, about what happened last night. And if I don't like the answers, I'm calling your mom. You wouldn't. Try me. So Saad told her. Not everything. She left out the warehouse, the kneeling men, the way Minjun's knuckles had split against someone's face. But she told her enough. The attack, the hospital visit from Dr. Yoon, the declaration of protection. The email from the dean that had mysteriously appeared. And as she talked, eating soup that tasted like cardboard but was probably keeping her alive, she watched Yoonji's face cycle through horror, anger, fear, and finally, grudging acceptance. You're really doing this, Yoonji said when Saad finished. You're really letting him protect you. What choice do I have? You could leave. Transfer schools. Go back to Nigeria. Something. And give up everything I've worked for? Saad shook her head. No. I'm staying. I'm finishing medical school. I'm becoming a doctor. And if that means being untouchable in Seoul's criminal underworld, then fine. I'll be untouchable. Yoonji looked at her for a long moment, and Saad saw the moment her friend gave up trying to save her. Okay. But when this all goes to hell, and it will go to hell, I'm saying I told you so. Fair enough. They spent the rest of the day in comfortable silence, Yoonji studying while Saad dozed on and off, her body demanding rest even as her mind raced with everything that had changed in the past 24 hours. At some point, her phone buzzed again. Minjun, how are you feeling? Saad typed one-handed, her ribs protesting even that small movement, like I got hit by a truck. But alive. Good. That's good. I'm sending dinner later. Real food, not ramyeon. You don't have to. I know. I want to. Let me take care of you, doctor. There it was again. Doctor. Saad stared at her phone, at that single word, and felt something warm and dangerous bloom in her chest. This was how it started, she realized. This was how smart women with promising futures made catastrophically bad decisions. They let men call them pet names. They accepted protection they didn't ask for. They started believing that maybe, just maybe, they could have both worlds, the legitimate and the criminal, the future they'd planned and the present that had chosen them. She should shut this down. Draw boundaries. Tell Minjun that their arrangement was purely transactional, that his protection was appreciated but not wanted, that she could take care of herself. Instead, she typed, "Thank you." And meant it. Chapter 5. The Price of Protection. 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo where Saad existed in a bubble of forced rest and unexpected surveillance. True to his word, Minjun sent food daily, not takeout, but actual home-cooked meals that arrived in insulated containers, labeled in neat Korean script with reheating instructions. Someone was cooking for her. Someone who knew she preferred less salt, more vegetables, and had an inexplicable fondness for Nigerian jollof rice that appeared twice in the first week alone. "This is insane," Yoonji said on day 5, examining a container of what appeared to be professionally made bibimbap. "He has someone cooking for you. Like you're some kind of, I don't know, valued asset." "I think that's exactly what I am," Saad replied, wincing as she shifted on the couch. Her ribs were healing, but slowly, and every breath was still a reminder of that night in the alley. The surveillance was subtler but no less present. Saad noticed the man who'd taken up residence in the coffee shop across from her building, always reading the same newspaper. The woman who walked her dog past Saada's apartment every 2 hours, like clockwork. The fact that whenever Yoonji left, usually late evening after making sure Saad had eaten, someone always seemed to be walking the same direction, maintaining a careful 20-meter distance. On day 8, Saada's mother called. Saadya, her mother began in Korean, using the affectionate diminutive that always made Saad feel simultaneously loved and infantilized. "Dean Park mentioned you were ill. Why didn't you tell me?" Because explaining, "I'm recovering from being beaten by rival gangsters," wasn't a conversation any daughter wanted to have with her mother. "It's just a bad flu, Yama. Nothing serious." "A flu that requires 2 weeks of medical leave?" "Don't lie to your mother." Saada's mother, a former nurse herself, had a sixth sense for medical deception. Saad pivoted. "I also had some stress-related complications. You know how intense 4th year is. I just needed rest." A long pause. Then, in English, "Are you eating properly? Not just ramen?" "Yes, Yama. I'm eating very well, actually." "Good. Your father wants to visit." "I told him no, you need rest, but you know how he is." Saada's heart clenched. Her father, visiting now, would have questions. So many questions. And unlike her mother, who generally accepted surface-level explanations, her father had spent 20 years as a defense attorney in Lagos. He could cross-examine a statue and make it confess. "Tell Appa I'm fine. I'll visit during the break, I promise." Another pause. "You sound different." "Different how?" "Harder. Like something happened." Her mother's voice dropped. "Saadya, if someone is bothering you, if you're in trouble." "I'm not in trouble, Yama. Just tired. School is exhausting." The sound of maternal skepticism, universal across all cultures. "Okay, but you call if you need anything. Anything at all. Your father and I, we can." "I know. I will. I love you." "Love you too, daughter." After she hung up, Saad sat in the afternoon light streaming through her apartment window and felt the full weight of her double life. To her parents, she was still their brilliant daughter, the one who'd made them proud by getting into Seoul's top medical school. To Yoonji, she was a friend making questionable choices, but ultimately salvageable. To Minjun. What was she to Minjun? As if summoned by the thought, her phone buzzed. "Can I visit? Or are you still recovering?" Saad looked around her apartment. It was a mess. Takeout containers despite the home-cooked meals, she'd been stress-eating convenience store snacks, medical textbooks scattered across every surface, her laundry situation best described as catastrophic. She looked down at herself, ratty sweatpants, her father's old university t-shirt, hair that hadn't seen proper care in a week. She should say no. Tell him she wasn't ready for visitors. Maintain the professional distance that had somehow evaporated the moment she'd called him from her bathroom floor. "Give me 20 minutes to make myself presentable." "You don't need to be presentable for me." "But I'll wait." 20 minutes later, actually 30, because cracked ribs made everything take twice as long. Saad had managed to put on clean clothes, run a brush through her hair, and stuff most of the visible trash into plastic bags. The apartment still looked like a depressed medical student lived there. Accurate, but at least it didn't look like a crime scene. The knock came. 3 short, 1 long. "Come in," Saad called, then remembered she'd locked the door this time. "Wait, hold on." But the door was already opening. Minjun had a key. Of course he had a key. Why wouldn't he have a key to her apartment? That was totally normal and not at all invasive. He stepped in carrying a bag from a bakery Saad recognized, one of those expensive places in Gangnam where a single slice of cake cost more than her weekly grocery budget. He was dressed down today, Relatively speaking, dark jeans, a fitted black sweater that probably cost more than her rent, leather jacket that looked like it had been custom-made. He looked good. Unfairly good. Saad tried not to notice and failed miserably. "You're walking better," he observed, setting the bakery bag on her kitchen counter. "How's the pain?" "Manageable. I've been taking the medications Dr. Yoon prescribed." Saad gestured at her face, which had gone from horrific crime scene to moderately alarming bruise gallery. "The swelling's down. I can almost see out of both eyes now." Progress. Minjun turned to face her fully, and his expression did something complicated when he looked at her injuries. Guilt, maybe. Or anger that hadn't fully dissipated. "I should have had more men on you. Should have known the Beck family would retaliate that way." "You couldn't have known." "I should have." He moved closer, and Saad found herself backed against the kitchen counter, though not uncomfortably. He reached up, his fingers ghosting along her healing cheekbone with the same gentle precision he'd shown that first night. "In my world, we don't get second chances. Mistakes cost lives." "Yours almost," his jaw tightened. "That can't happen again." "Hence the untouchable status," Saad said, trying for levity. "I've been meaning to ask, how exactly does that work? Do I get a membership card?" "A secret handshake." Minjun's lips quirked. "Your face is the card. The handshake is everyone else staying far away from you." "Must be lonely." "It is." The words were quiet, honest. "But safe. And after what happened, safe is more important than social." Saad studied him, this man who'd somehow become central to her life in the space of 3 months. Really studied him. The faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hair fell slightly too long over his forehead, on purpose, she suspected, the subtle tension in his shoulders that suggested he was always ready for violence. "Why?" she asked. "Why what?" "Why me? You said it yourself, you have Dr. Yoon. You could go to any number of underground doctors who've been doing this for years. Why keep coming back to an overtired medical student in a shoebox apartment?" Minjun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested he was choosing his words carefully. "Do you remember what you asked me the first night? After you'd stitched my shoulder?" Saad thought back. "I asked if you were going to kill whoever shot you." "No. After that." "You asked," he smiled slightly. "You asked if it hurt. Not the wound. The life. Doesn't it hurt," you said, "living like this?" Saad did remember now. It had been a stupid question, born of exhaustion and the surreal nature of the situation. She'd expected him to laugh or deflect. "You said yes," she recalled. "I said yes," Minjun confirmed. "Because it does. Every day. And then he gestured at her apartment, at the scattered textbooks and the cheap furniture, and the evidence of a life being built through sheer stubborn will. You looked at me like I was still human. Like I wasn't just a walking collection of terrible decisions and blood debts. You saw the person under the violence. So this is what, gratitude? You're protecting me because I was nice to you once." "No." He stepped back, giving her space. "I'm protecting you because in a world full of people who want something from me, fear, money, power, connection, you're the only one who just wanted to help. No agenda. No angle. Just," he shrugged. "Medicine." Sada's throat tightened. "It wasn't completely altruistic. You paid very well. You would have helped anyway. The money just made it easier to justify." He wasn't wrong. Saad had known from the first night that she'd help Minjun regardless of payment. Some instinct, the same one that had pushed her into medicine, couldn't stand seeing someone bleed without trying to stop it. "So what now?" she asked. "I'm untouchable. You've dealt with the Beck family. My ribs are healing. Do we just go back to how things were before?" "Do you want to?" Did she? The safe answer was yes. Resume their careful transactional relationship, maintain professional distance, pretend that warehouse had never happened. But Saad was tired of safe answers. Safe answers had gotten her beaten in an alley. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "This is all, it's not what I planned. When I came to Seoul, I had this clear path: study, graduate, residency, become a surgeon. Save lives. Make my parents proud. Be normal." Normal's overrated. Easy for you to say. You chose this life. I just fell into it. Did you? Minjun tilted his head. You opened your door to a bleeding stranger. You took blood money. You kept my number. Those were choices, Saad. Maybe not the ones you planned, but choices nonetheless. He was right, and Saad hated that he was right. She'd convinced herself she was a passive participant in this relationship, swept up by circumstances beyond her control. But that was a lie. A comfortable lie, but still a lie. She'd wanted this. Maybe not consciously, but some part of her had craved the excitement, the danger, the feeling of being essential to someone powerful. Med school was grueling, but predictable. Minjun was chaos and adrenaline and the constant awareness that everything could go catastrophically wrong at any moment. It was addictive. I have conditions, Saad heard herself say. Conditions. If we're doing this, whatever this is, I have rules. She counted on her fingers, wincing as the gesture pulled her ribs. 1. No more surprises. If something affects my life, I want to know about it. No mysterious emails from deans, no randomly appearing security details I haven't approved. Reasonable. 2. My education comes first. Always. I'm finishing medical school, and nothing, not territorial disputes, not rival families, not anything interferes with that. Agreed. 3. This was the hard one. Honesty. I'm tired of not knowing what's happening. If there's danger, tell me. If you're making decisions about my safety, include me. I'm not a child to be protected and managed. I'm a partner, Minjun finished. Equal stake, equal say. Saad blinked. That's not what I was going to say. But it's what you meant. He moved closer again, and this time Saad didn't back up. You want agency. Autonomy. The ability to make informed choices about your own life. That's fair. He smiled. That's very you. Is that a compliment? Yes. They stood there, inches apart, and Saad became hyper-aware of everything, the warmth radiating from his body, the faint scent of his cologne, cedar and something darker, the way his eyes tracked the pulse in her throat. We should probably talk about the obvious thing, Minjun said quietly. What obvious thing? The fact that I want to kiss you and have wanted to for approximately 2 months. Saada's breath caught. You can't just. I can. I am. His hand came up, cupping her uninjured cheek. But I won't. Not until you're healed. Not until you've had time to think clearly, without painkillers and trauma clouding your judgment. I'm thinking clearly now. No, you're thinking clearly once the bruises fade and the ribs heal, and you've had space to decide if this is actually what you want, or if it's just adrenaline and proximity. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, featherlight. I can wait, Saad. I'm very good at waiting. Then he stepped back, and the loss of contact felt like a shock of cold water. I should go, he said, already moving toward the door. Rest. Heal. And when you're ready, when you're really ready, we'll talk about what this is. Wait. But he was already gone, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that left Saad standing in her kitchen, heart racing, mind spinning, and absolutely no idea what had just happened. The bakery bag sat on her counter. Inside, she found a slice of strawberry shortcake and a note in Minjun's precise handwriting. Your favorite, according to Yoonji. Eat something sweet. Doctor's orders. Saad stared at the note, at the cake, at the closed door. Minjun had asked Yoonji about her favorite desserts. He'd restrained himself from kissing her out of respect for her autonomy. He'd called her a partner. This was either the beginning of something wonderful or the start of her complete destruction. Possibly both. She ate the cake. It was perfect. 3 weeks later, Saad returned to medical school on a Tuesday morning when the Seoul air was crisp and clean, autumn finally asserting itself after a brutal summer. Her ribs had healed to the point where she could breathe without wincing, and her face looked normal again, or normal enough that strategic concealer could hide the last fading traces of bruising. She'd expected whispers, stares, questions about her mysterious 2-week absence. What she got was something else entirely: respect. People moved out of her way in the hallways. Classmates who'd previously ignored her now nodded in greeting. Her usual study corral in the library remained perpetually empty, as if reserved. In the cafeteria, 2 upperclassmen gave up their table when she approached, smiling politely. It was unnerving. They know, Yeonji said during lunch, keeping her voice low. Not the details, obviously. But something's changed. People are deferential. Minjun's protection, Sod realized. It extends beyond the criminal underworld. How far does it extend? I'm afraid to find out. That afternoon, she had anatomy lab, her favorite class, where abstract knowledge became concrete reality through careful dissection. Her lab partner, a quiet student named Kim Jae-sung who rarely spoke to her, was waiting at their station with an odd expression. "Welcome back, Sod SSI," he said formally. "I saved all the notes from the lectures you missed." "And I." He hesitated. "My uncle wanted me to convey his respects. He says your protection is acknowledged and honored." Sada's hands stilled over her lab coat. "Your uncle. He works in import-export. In Busan." The meaningful pause said everything the words didn't. Her lab partner's uncle was connected. And now Jae-sung was acting as messenger, ensuring Sod knew that even here, in the sterile environment of medical school, Minjun's reach extended. "Thank you," Sod said carefully. "Tell your uncle I appreciate his acknowledgement." They worked through the lab in silence, dissecting the cardiovascular system with practiced precision. But Sada's mind was elsewhere, cataloging this new reality. How many of her classmates had connections to Seoul's underworld? How many had received the same message about her protection? How had her world become so thoroughly infiltrated without her noticing? After class, she called Minjun. "Doctor," he answered, warmth in his voice. "How was your first day back?" "Weird. Everyone's treating me differently." "Differently how?" "Respectfully. Even people who'd never spoken to me before." "Minjun, how far did you spread this protection?" "As far as necessary." He paused. "Are you uncomfortable?" Was she? Part of her, the part that had spent 4 years fighting to be taken seriously, to be seen as more than a diversity admission or a foreign oddity, should be furious. This respect wasn't earned through her merit or her work. It was borrowed, reflected, a shadow of Minjun's power. But another part, the part that remembered being invisible for years, noticed a certain grim satisfaction in finally being seen. "I don't know," Sod admitted. "It's just different. You can tell me to stop. One word, and I'll pull back the protection, let things return to normal." "And be vulnerable again?" "You were never vulnerable." "Not really." "You're stronger than you know, Sod." His voice softened. "But yes, without the explicit protection, you'd be an easier target." "Yes." Sod stood in the medical school courtyard, watching her classmates mill around between classes, each one potentially connected to the world Minjun navigated daily. She thought about agency, about safety, about the impossible choices that had brought her here. "Keep the protection," she said finally. "But I need to understand it better. All of it. The structure, the rules, how this world actually works." "Are you sure?" "No. But I'm tired of operating blind. If I'm going to be part of this, even peripherally, I need to know what I'm part of." Silence. "Then, dinner tonight. I'll explain everything." And Sod. "Yes. Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing to stay." He hung up before she could respond, leaving Sod standing in the autumn sunlight, her future suddenly full of possibilities she'd never imagined and wasn't sure she wanted. But she'd make that choice, was making that choice, with eyes open and stakes clear. Whatever came next, at least it would be her decision. Epilogue, 6 months later. The thing about choosing chaos, Sod reflected while suturing a bullet wound in Minjun's expensive Gangnam penthouse at 3 in the morning, is that it never stays chosen. You have to keep choosing it over and over every day. "You're getting faster," Minjun observed, watching her work with the calm of someone who'd been shot enough times to find it mundane. "Practice makes perfect." Sod tied off the last stitch with a practiced flick of her wrist. "Though I'd prefer you stopped giving me so much practice." "I'll try." "No promises." She cleaned the wound, applied antibacterial ointment, dressed it with professional efficiency. 6 months of this, 6 months of late-night emergency calls, of learning to read the subtle shifts in Seoul's criminal landscape, of becoming fluent in a language of violence and loyalty that had no formal curriculum. 6 months of falling. Because that's what this was, Sod knew. The late-night dinners where Minjun explained territorial disputes over sushi. The way he'd shown up at her anatomy practical with coffee exactly how she liked it. The careful touches that had progressed from medical to something else entirely, though they'd both been cautious about crossing that final line. The way he looked at her now, like she was simultaneously the most dangerous and most precious thing in his world. All done, Saad said, packing up her supplies. Try not to use that shoulder for heavy lifting for at least a week. And by heavy lifting, I mean shooting people. No promises there either. Saad rolled her eyes, but couldn't quite suppress her smile. This was her life now. Medical student by day, underground doctor by night. Minjun's what? Partner? Girlfriend? The terminology felt inadequate for what they'd become to each other. As if reading her thoughts, Minjun caught her hand. Stay tonight. It wasn't the first time he'd asked. But it was the first time Saad didn't immediately have an excuse ready. I have histology at 9, she said weakly. I'll have you back by 8. With coffee and breakfast. Tempting. I'm very good at tempting you. He pulled her closer, careful of his injured shoulder. Besides, we should talk about the other thing. What other thing? The internship offer. Saad froze. She'd gotten the email 3 days ago, a prestigious surgical internship at Seoul National University Hospital, starting after graduation. It was everything she'd worked for, the culmination of 4 years of brutal study and sacrifice. It was also, according to Minjun's careful investigation, partially facilitated by one of the hospital board members who had connections to his organization. I earned that position, Saad said, pulling back. My grades, my clinical rotations. I know. You did earn it. Minjun's voice was gentle but firm. The board member simply ensured you weren't overlooked. Your merit got you in the room. The connection just made sure the right people were paying attention. It's not the same as earning it fairly. Saad. He cupped her face, making her look at him. In Seoul, nothing is earned fairly. Every position, every opportunity, every advancement, they all involve connections, favors, relationships. You think the Chaebol kids in your program got there purely on merit. That's different. How? Because it was. Because using family connections was somehow more acceptable than using criminal ones. Because Saad had spent her entire life trying to prove she deserved to be here, and accepting help felt like admitting she couldn't do it alone. But looking at Minjun now, seeing the conviction in his eyes, Saad realized something fundamental. She wasn't alone. Hadn't been for months. And maybe that was okay. I hate that you're right, she muttered. I'm often right. It's very annoying. Despite everything, Saad laughed. Minjun smiled, that rare genuine expression that made him look younger, less dangerous, almost peaceful. Stay, he said again. This time, Saad didn't hesitate. Okay. She stayed. And in the morning, true to his word, Minjun had her back to her apartment by 8 with coffee and breakfast, jollof rice, because he was incorrigible, and a kiss that promised more conversations, more choices, more moments of choosing chaos over safety. 3 months later, Saad would graduate top of her class. 6 months after that, she'd complete her first solo surgery. A year later, she'd saved the life of a Busan crime lord's daughter, cementing her reputation as Seoul's most protected and most talented underground physician. But all of that was future. Present was simpler, coffee that was exactly right, a man who saw her clearly, and the strange, terrifying, exhilarating knowledge that she'd chosen this life with open eyes and steady hands. Honor bestows a crown, her name meant. She wore hers with defiance, with grace, and with the absolute certainty that some bridges, once burned, illuminate the path forward better than any map. The end.